Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening if you're in the UK at the moment. So welcome to this event, the UK and Canada Architecture Information Event and Networking Reception. I think most people will know, but for those who don't, particularly potentially online, yesterday was a momentous day where there was an agreement signed, a mutual recognition agreement signed between the United Kingdom and Canada to facilitate mutual recognition of architecture qualifications and licensure in both countries. This session, though, is to get into the nuts and bolts and to explain what that actually means in practice. So for those of you who are online and potentially in a different time zone, we're in Toronto in Canada for an event, and we have about 50 or 60 people online. We're going to go through a presentation from ROAC and ARB to explain the mechanics, and there'll be plenty of time for questions after. Before handing over to colleagues, I just wanted to say a brief thank you to the UK government, in particular the Department for Business and Trade, who have facilitated today's event in person. So without any further ado, I'd just like to hand over to colleagues from ARB first, I think, and ROAC to talk you through what the MRA means in practice.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon and good evening to everybody online. My name is Emma Matthews. I'm the Director of Governance and International at the Architects Registration Board in the UK and have worked on the development and drafting of the agreement with colleagues from AIBC and ROAC. I'll hand over to my colleague Rob to introduce himself.
Hello everyone, I'm Rob Wilson. I'm International Manager. I've worked with and supported Emma throughout the development of the MRA, and I'll be kind of instrumental in making sure it keeps on working and keeps on doing good things going forward.
Thank you. I'm Mark Vernon with the Architectural Institute of British Columbia, CEO, and I've had the pleasure of working with Rob and Emma over the past year in bringing this to fruition.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jenilyn Torres. I'm the Director of Registration and Licensing with the Architectural Institute of BC.
Introduction first on the Canadian side, ROAC. Some of the Canadians may remember the term CALA. ROAC is the successor to that, Regulatory Organizations of Architecture in Canada. I introduced myself, as did Jenilyn from the AIBC. ROAC is comprised of the 11 regulators in Canada, provincial and territorial. And the individual regulators have the privilege of acting as secretariat for various agreements. British Columbia is secretariat on behalf of Canada for this agreement, and we've worked with Rob and Emma in the course of these discussions. And I need to flag the blistering speed with which this came to fruition. A testament to the similarity and equivalency of our two systems. I think start to final draft was probably in 1 year, which is an astonishing amount of time. As with all professions, the regulator has a number of requirements. Particular to today's event is that around setting the standards for entry into the profession. We'll talk in detail about requirements for UK architects coming to Canada and for Canadian architects looking to go to the UK. Again, back to the ROAC, it is in itself not a regulator, but it works with the regulators, and we have set the national standards, which have enabled us to undertake the MRA, national requirements for entry to internship, for examinations, and the like. Look forward to receiving your questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
So just a little more about the ARB for those of you who aren't aware of us and don't know what we do. So ARB is an independent professional regulator. We cover the whole of the United Kingdom. We are a statutory body that was established, and we administer the Architects Act 1997 in the UK, and we're accountable to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So we're not part of government, but they do kind of keep an eye on us and make sure that we're delivering our legislative responsibilities appropriately. We're not for profit, so it's quite important to note that. The law in the UK gives us a number of functions. One of the most paramount ones of those is ensuring that only those who are competent to join the UK register are competent to practice. And we do this through approving and accrediting qualifications in architecture. Those who then have the appropriate qualifications can join the register. We maintain the register, which is publicly available, so that anyone who's using the services of an architect in the UK can be sure that that individual is competent and fit to practice. We set the standards for conduct and practice in the UK, and that the profession must meet, and take action when architects fall below that standard. We set and monitor the requirements for continuing professional development, and we also protect the title architect in the UK. So now we'll move on to a bit more about the MRA itself. And so we'll get into a little bit more detail about how people will move backwards and forwards between our respective bodies. But really underpinning the MRA are a few key requirements. So architects must be registered and in good standing, either with the Architects Registration Board or in a Canadian jurisdiction, and hold qualifications that are in scope of the agreement. We don't have any nationality or residency requirements, and the MRA solely relates to registration in both of our countries. When those using the MRA will be responsible for any kind of visa issues or immigration issues, the MRA does not deal with those or cover those at all. And as Mark has already said, the day-to-day operation of the MRA will be handled through the AIBC in Canada on behalf of the ROAC. So getting into a little bit more detail about how UK qualified architects will be able to move to Canada and register in one of the jurisdictions here. So applicants, the basics of this really are that applicants will need to hold an ARB accredited Part 1 qualification, or have passed what we call our prescribed examination process at Part 1 level. So that's the process where somebody with an international qualification or non-ARB accredited qualification will have come through to join the UK register. So having qualifications at that first level, and then similarly also additionally holding an ARB accredited qualification at Part 2, or have come through our examination process at the same level, and then an ARB accredited Part 3 qualification. So if the individual holds those qualifications, has come through one of those pathways, then they will be eligible to use the MRA. As I mentioned, the qualifications must have been assessed by ARB or be accredited by the ARB. So the other requirements over and above that, as we mentioned, the individual must be in good standing. So we will look at that. You must be actively registered, and then we will be able to certify the credentials and confirm those and issue a certificate with those details to our colleagues in Canada. I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Rob, who's going to talk a bit more about the process.
Okay, so what do you need to do if you're a British qualified architect and you want to go to Canada? So first of all, this is all going to be web-based. So on the day the route opens, all the information will be published on the ARB website, including eligibility requirements. So just to recap, as Emma's already said, Part 1 and Part 2 qualifications, or the equivalent via the prescribed examination route, you can kind of reconfirm that. using the web-based information, plus a Part 3 in good standing. That's your sort of point of entry. We will be just recapping that information as part of the online application supporting documents. Having sort of self-checked that you're eligible to use the route, you will then need to apply for a certificate from ARB to confirm that you're within the scope of the MOA. The certificate application will go through via the My ARB portal. That will be linked from the main page where all of the information is hosted. So under international routes, we have links to all of our MOAs, and we will be pushing out information on our social media channels. So it'll probably be quite difficult to miss once it launches. So put your application in through the My ARB portal. It's usually a handful of days, I would guess, unless the applications team have got any sort of follow-up questions they may have. You should have your certificate sort of issued to you in sort of 5 to 10 working days, probably on the lower side of that, unless the team is particularly busy. So the certificate will come back out to you. Once you have the certificate, it is then pretty much over to ROAC. You will need to provide that certificate to ROAC to begin the process as a UK architect in Canada, and they will advise you, having transmitted that certificate to them, as to what you're going to need to do in terms of next steps. But to summarise, and I will defer to colleagues at ROAC if anyone has any sort of further questions a little later, to make sure that sort of UK architects are supported in knowing what they will be required to do in Canada. So there's an architectural course, architectural practice course in Canada. It consists of 4 online modules. It's only about things that are unique to Canada, so it's not repeating things that architects will typically have learnt in terms of professionalism, that kind of thing, where we know that's sort of embedded. So we've given an example here of requirements for seismic and climate, for instance. We know from conversations with our colleagues, it's fewer than 10 hours work. There will be a brief knowledge check after each module, and resource lists will be provided to enable applicants to sort of study to make sure that they know where they need to be. Okay, so once applicants have contacted ROAC, course completion certificate will need to be provided. ROAC will then issue a letter which will enable the applicant to go on to the Canadian jurisdiction to go through the final steps in licensing in that sort of province or territory. So the letter will confirm that sort of, everything has been done in Canada. The applicant is effectively a safe pair of hands to practice, and then they will be able to go on to sort of make a formal application. Okay, so the important stuff. So what's it going to cost? As Emma's already said, costs are designed particularly to be sort of cost neutral. So we recover what we require to recover to sort of do the job we're doing. So an ARB MOA certificate is £80. We've given you the Canadian dollar equivalent. The ROAC application fee is again 3,000 Canadian with a UK equivalent. That fee covers an application and a review fee under the MOA, and it also covers the online practice course. Having done that, there will be a jurisdictional registration fee within Canada. That fee will vary. When we come on to sort of our equivalent fees, you'll see our fees vary. They stack up in a slightly different way depending on the time of year. So it's relatively symmetrical. So if anyone has any questions, we do have an opportunity to respond to those at the end of this process. There'll be an opportunity to ask those. So I will just hand over to colleagues at ROAC for the next section.
So the basic requirements for those architects who might be interested in applying under the terms of this agreement to go and register with the ARB. The first one is having a ROAC certificate. So a ROAC certificate confirms that you are a registered architect in good standing in Canada. And if you are registered in multiple Canadian jurisdictions, you must be in good standing in all of those Canadian jurisdictions. A ROAC certificate also confirms that you have met the education experience and examination requirements as set out by the mutual recognition agreement. And in addition to the ROAC certificate, you need to also complete any jurisdiction-specific requirements set by the ARB. So just to go through these requirements in more detail, I've mentioned the education requirement. So you should have completed an accredited degree in architecture, or if it's a non-accredited degree or diploma in architecture, it needs to be certified by the Canadian Architectural Certification Board, or CACB, that it is equivalent or meets the Canadian educational standards. So that's the education requirement. There's also the experience requirement. You can see in there the IAP, or the Internship in Architecture program. I think some of you have gone through the Internship in Architecture program. So you're quite familiar with the experience requirements that, well, needed to be met under the IAP, or its predecessor, the Canadian Experience Record Book. So that's the experience requirement. And an examination requirement is a national exam. So it's the examination for architects in Canada, or EXAC, or its equivalent. And as mentioned, you need to have active registration and in good standing in a Canadian jurisdiction. So all of these taken together will make you eligible to apply for a ROAC certificate. So in terms of process, it's also quite similar to the ARB process. First is to review eligibility. And I do encourage you to go to the ROAC website and also the ARB website. So we have information there regarding the mutual recognition agreement, the key requirements, and we'll continue uploading information as we, well, basically before implementation date of May 14th. So you will have more information on our website. After reviewing the eligibility requirements, then you can contact us. As we mentioned, AIBC is secretariat for this agreement. So we will be your contact for incoming and outgoing applications. So you can contact us. You can ask questions, of course, if you have specific questions relating to your application. We will review. So in terms of certification, you'll have to fill out application forms. We'll review if you indeed meet the requirements. And once that's done, then we will issue a ROAC certificate. And then from then on, you have to complete your ARB applications. You will then need to contact the ARB for additional requirements. In terms of additional requirement, there's a UK adaptation assessment process, and all of the architects applying under an ARB MRA registration pathway or route registration are required to complete this adaptation assessment. So in terms of key components, you need to prepare a reflective career summary. You need to review and prepare for a professional interview. And of course, a professional interview to assess whether you meet the assessment criteria. In terms of fees, a ROAC MRA certificate is 500 Canadian plus tax. And then there are other fees that are ARB's fees in terms of assessment and also the ARB registration fee. I'll pass it over to Emma.
So we've tried to ensure that as many people as possible will fall within scope of the agreement and be able to benefit from it. But there is a small exception, which may be something that we can review in the longer term future. But to get us started, there will be an exception. So if anyone has already benefited from either of our kind of existing mutual recognition agreements, then I'm afraid at the moment you wouldn't fall in scope within the agreement. But as I said, this may be something that we will come back to and talk about in the longer term future. We plan to keep the MRA under review and see how we can continuously improve it. So whilst these individuals in this situation won't be in scope initially, that's not to say that it will remain the case in the long term. So yeah. And then the all-important thing, when are we launching, when are we opening, when can you apply? So we're each going to be opening on the Wednesday, the 14th of May, at open of business for each of us. So on either side of the Atlantic, it will be open of business. And then we will be accepting applications in the way that colleagues have described. There'll be much more information as we've referred to on our website, so please do go and have a look at the details that are there, and then we will take things forward. I think that's everything that we had to say. We wanted to keep this short and brief and just give you the kind of basic instructions and information. So very happy, I'm sure, between all of us to answer any questions that you might have, or indeed that we may have from online people as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've realised that being vertically challenged means I can't actually see the panel over the screen, but I will try and lean back. We're getting questions online, so there are about 50 or 60 people online, but we'll also take questions in the room, and James has got a microphone. So usual protocol, if you identify yourself and your name and where you're from, and we'll farm out questions. As I say, for people online, there's probably about 20 or 30 people in the room, and there's lots of people on line. So anyone got any questions? I'll try and alternate between online and in person. So James, I'm afraid geographical proximity means if you just take a question from the lady here.
Oh, hey. Thank you. I'm Yan Shi, and I'm ARB registered architect and working in Canada for like 2 years. So I'm really happy like you have this mutual agreement. It's really like I'm looking forward to when I first move in Canada. So I have 3 questions. Hope it's not too much. First, like how long the whole process will take, and how long the practice course would take for the online course. And the second one, do I need to finish the practice course before I send the application to ROAC, like the Canada one, or I can do that at the same time to save time maybe? And the third one is like, in terms of registration, it is restricted for certain provinces like Ontario or BC, or is kind of you can do nationwide for Canada? Thank you.
So I'm going to answer your questions in random order. So in terms of process, you would need to contact us, AIBC, through the ROAC website. We will have our contact information available on the ROAC website. The first step is really to fill out the application form. So it gives us more information about you, identification, some documents, and so on and so forth. So after the applications have been submitted to ROAC, then we're able to determine whether you're eligible to continue on to the process, and you will be given access to the online courses. The online courses consist of 4 modules. They are on demand. So it's self-paced. It's, well, probably kind of approximately less than 10 hours to complete. So it depends upon you how you kind of go through the courses. There's robust, I'd say, references that you can go back to. So you'll have access to those references as well. And then following that, then we issue you a letter that you have completed all of the requirements. And we will also send that letter to your intended Canadian jurisdiction. So you can either do multiple Canadian jurisdictions, or I would suggest just do one and then you can do the other later on. In terms of timeline, it varies between probably around 2 weeks to a few more weeks, but it also depends whether you can complete all of those courses immediately, and then we can move forward with the process.
Thanks very much. I've got a question online here, probably for Mark or Jeneline. It says, under the UK-Canada Mutual Recognition Agreement, does ARBC require UK-registered architects to have a minimum of 4 years of post-registration experience, specifically in the UK? How does this align with ARBC's approach to other MRAs, such as the United States, Australia, or New Zealand?
That is a well-researched question. I'm delighted to say that there is no post-licensure experience requirement with this agreement. Unlike other agreements, a Canadian architect or a UK architect immediately upon registration in their home jurisdiction can apply to go abroad. Touching on the others, the US agreement is under review. There should be an announcement forthcoming, which will remove the 1-year post-licensure requirement. That's a preview, not official as of yet. Other agreements, and I'm going to reference Australia and New Zealand, they are under the umbrella of the APEC Architect Agreement, which has within it a 7-year post-licensure requirement. So we're restricted with that.
Very good, thanks, Mark. There was a gentleman here. Second row. I'm in danger of identifying people by their dress sense, which is always a high-risk strategy. So I'll just say gentleman in row 2.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I feel like Christmas has come early for me this year because I don't know if any of you are familiar with the BEFA program. So unfortunately, I'm 2/3 of the way into that. And my first question is going to be, can I get a refund from before I was just about to embark? Well, my target for this year was to finally bite the bullet and get on their 12-stage portal and do the equivalent of my Part 3 again over a year or a year and a half or whatever it takes. So when I saw your email inviting to this event, I thought, well, this is great. So I know this sounds a bit parsimonious, but I wasn't too clear on the cost there. I understand there'll be an annual registration fee, but there was a one-off payment as well. So I think it was lumped together. So I'm not querying it. I just wanted to be clear about.
We'll try and bring that slide back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I was just out of curiosity, because as my current employer, I've been ARB registered for 38 years now. Been working in Canada since for 8 years for change firms because of redundancies through COVID and so on. But ultimately, my present employer didn't require me to register because I'm an ARB architect in healthcare. We know what we do. You're registered there. We ask you to come here, so it's not an issue with us. So my gripe has always been with the IRCC applying for PA, why I have to go through these hoops if my employer's happy and I can prove I'm registered. So in a way, this kind of ties in with my immigration, my attempting to get permanent residency status as well, because my employer hadn't required me to be registered with OAA, I was happy. However, points on PR raised its head, and at one stage, being involved in the sector of architecture I was in, was good. Now it's like the way the point system sort of varies. So the immigration consultant that my firm uses recommended that I register the OAA to get my points for my PR. So I bit the bullet and picked up on BEFA where I left off. And now you've come along like the cavalry. Sorry, that probably sounds very anti-Indigenous, but anyway, so you saved me a lot of time. Hopefully, I'm not worried about the cost, but I was wondering in terms of permit and so on, if there's some link there that there's a way you can kind of prod IRCC, hey, you know, these guys want to work here. But so I've had to renew my temporary residency, but I've had to flagpole how many times I can't remember. So I was just wondering if there's a kind of a step up that way that will help nudge these various departments that don't talk to each other and
Yes, Mark, that's one for you. We put the slide up, you'll see.
Right,
But there are
thank you.
I guess, two elements to the question. One is eligibility, and the other one is what you can do with the Canadian government and provinces.
Yes, we have no direct connection with the immigration process. We have never really understood the process or the thought behind which architecture some years is given prominence and is a priority, and it's not. It varies. The good news for those who are not yet in the country and not from an MRA country is the CACB, the Canadian Architectural Certification Board, has been designated as an official assessment site. I think it's only the third such designated by IRCC as opposed to one of the traditional testing centers, which gives expedited application for those abroad. Doesn't help you. I think there was a thank you in there somewhere embedded.
Sorry,
so I think there was a thank you somewhere embedded in there.
There was.
Cannot help with the actual immigration process, but this will certainly speed up your registration process. And I did a quick review of the ARB registers some time ago and came up with about 200 ARB registrants in Canada. Anecdotally, I think few of them are registered in Canada as well. So many will be in a similar situation.
Mark, I've got another question online which links to that, which is from someone called Ryan Montgomery. Says, do you need to be on the ARB register prior to applying? I've been in Canada for 18 months now and have been removed from the ARB register. I assume that's not for anything sinister. I suspect that's registration has lapsed. I've applied under the BIFA and hope to receive an interview in May, but that's been pushed back to November. Should I keep my BIFA application open, or should I close that to allow others to move up the list? So I think that's part Emma, part Mark, maybe.
An applicant in either direction must be a registrant of country, their existing home country. So yes, this individual must be registered.
And I guess the speed at which that happens answers the second question, which is, do you proceed through one or the other process? But I'm sure both of our respective organisations can go into a bit more detail with any individual who's got a specific question. Okay, back to the room. Any hands? Yeah. Okay, James. I've missed people at the back. Okay.
Hi. First question: why has it taken so long? It's actually been easier to meet my wife, have 2 children, become a citizen than it has been to go through the BIFA process. I feel your pain. I'm very, very happy that this is going ahead right now. I've been registered with ARB since 2003. I've been out here for 12 years now. But my sincere question is, I decided to take the BCIN, which is a designer-orientated exam that you can take here with the building control department to enable you to submit building permits. I think it's actually quite productive. I've sat the exams for the legal exams, which speaks to the same level of basic requirements for an architect in both countries. Sat the small buildings, which is for residential, and large buildings, which is for anything up to 18 stories, I believe. Does that give me any credit on this 10-hour module?
Mark, I guess.
Let me answer that after touching on the module on the course, which I was going to do. It is not designed to be an examination. The intention behind it, the principle, is to assist an architect coming from the UK in flourishing in a practice in Canada. What is different in Canada or unique to Canada? Climactic, we talked, I think some might reference Scotland, but it does not match the Arctic for climate requirements. Seismic, the permitting process in Canada. So it is to assist and provide resources for someone to actually practice successfully in Canada. So your BCIN, that's unique to Ontario. Likely will be some overlap with what's in there. So that 2-hour module might take you 15 minutes, just as fast as you can click the pages forward. You asked why it took so long. I'll touch on it. I'll share an anecdote first that the original AIBC's Act, 1920 Architects Act, actually had a requirement that an architect be a British subject. That was one of the key requirements. So that disappeared sometime over the years. With the UK having been part of the EU, we could not undertake an individual agreement. So it was a 15-year process to work with the EU to finalize an agreement, which has been done, but we are awaiting both parliaments to have the opportunity to ratify it. So the UK has come through first.
And just to briefly add to that, our own legislation in the UK didn't allow ARB to negotiate or enter and sign agreements with international countries around the world. We were only able to work with the EU at the time, but obviously things have changed. Time has moved on. Our legislation has changed. It changed in 2022, 23. I think it was very early 23. And so after that, we've obviously moved forward and been talking to international partners. And the result of our discussions is one of the agreements, and that's with our ROAC counterparts.
Mark, there's quite a few questions online, which I think you've answered already in the presentation, but maybe for clarity, asking about whether you need to reside in a province in order to be able to start the process of securing registration or licensure under the MRA.
I'm going to focus on the word reside. The requirement is for registration. We have no residency requirements or citizenship requirements.
Very good. Any questions? We'll do one from this side of the room, and then we'll come to the other side of the room. It's John.
Thank you. John Kaminsky, Hawkins Brown Architects. Just to say, firstly, thank you very much. It's very welcome news. My question is, obviously the ARB requires continued professional development, CPD, to be recorded in a specific way. OAA require the same. How does that work? I'm obviously based here. I represent Hawkins Brown in Canada. I'll be taking advantage of the MRA. I'm also registered with the ARB in the UK. Will I need to do continued professional development in both countries and separately, or is that combined? How does that work? Thank you.
Emma, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So if you're on our register in the UK, yes, you will need to maintain your CPD records in line with the scheme. But if you are practicing here in Canada, you can obviously use that towards, upload that information and put that into your record and use that. And obviously that will be part of your CPD submission. So yeah, I'm just going to double check that with you, but I think that's the case. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, I mean, from a UK perspective, our system requires you to upload information a particular way, particularly adding reflection as part of it. But absolutely, as long as it relates to a broader definition of practice and you complete the two compulsory elements, which are currently around fire and life safety design and sustainability, absolutely. Mark, anything you want to add from a Canadian perspective? Okay. Now trying to be ambidextrous and look online. So Matthew Donkersley has asked, what would be the implications for foreign companies operating under, for example, ARBC temporary license arrangements if they have an ARB registered staff who undertake the required MRA courses? So I think that's something around kind of, the alternative options for temporary and permanent licensing.
You can definitely apply under the terms of this MRA, and if they wish to apply for individual registration as an architect at the AIBC, they can do so if they are eligible or they have met all of the requirements. One other requirement in order to practice architecture at the AIBC is that you need to be employed under an architectural firm. So there's a certificate of practice requirement for an architectural firm. So either they register their own firm, or they're employed by another architectural firm. So individual registration plus firm registration, or they are employed by a firm.
Very good,
So
thanks.
that's definitely an option
Yeah,
rather than a temporary license.
thanks, Jeanine. Hands on this side, a gentleman in the white shirt on the third row. I've just done what I said I wasn't going to do, which is talk about sartorial.
Thank you. Hello, Adam James from Ryder Architecture in Vancouver, and registered the ARB, also AIBC registered. As a survivor of the BEPA process, I'm very pleased that this has come along. I have a couple of in my team who are ARB registered, so they will probably be knocking your door come 14th of May. I also have a number of interns and graduates who are Part 2 registered. And looking at the presentation, it seems there's now going to be quite an easy recognition of the ARB Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. But for those people who obviously travel and adventure around the world and come to different countries and work, who are only at Part 2 stage, have made the decision to stay in Canada, that CACB accreditation of foreign credentials can take some time and be quite involved. With the recognition for qualified professionals, does it make it now easier for CACB for UK Part 2 registered architects to similarly join the intern process, say with the AIBC?
We've already started discussions with the CACB on how they can incorporate our recognition of that education into their certification process. And as for your interns, across Canada, it varies by jurisdiction as to how much international internship hours can be recognized. Some are quite generous, AIBC, others are a little more constrained in that recognition. So two distinct opportunities for your interns, but Jen Ellen is the one they should speak to, or yourself, once back in Vancouver.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Question, Emma, I think this one's probably for you. Eva Sampson, from Canada to the UK, can you explain more about the UKAA professional interview process, including timeline and payment? What is the recommended preparation for this interview? And I guess we might want to talk about what it is now and what it might be.
Yeah, sure. Really good question. Thank you. So to explain a little bit more about the UK adaptation assessment. So yes, there is an application process. Once you've made contact with the ARB team, they will guide you through the process step by step. We will issue an information pack and a resources pack to help you prepare for that. We'll ask you to submit a reflective career summary. There's templates to help you prepare that and put that together. We'll also give you some scenario-based questions to help you prepare. So there will be typical UK practice scenarios that you will be able to look at and sort of draft your answers to, so that you've got them with you for your professional interview. The team will help arrange the professional interview, and that will be a discussion with two assessors to determine whether or not you are ready to practice in the UK. So in a very similar way to Mark described, the course and the assessment that you have to sit in Canada, it's really a means of making sure you're ready to practice and you're safe to practice in the UK. That's the process that we have currently. That process is already under review. We're looking at it. We've learned a great deal from our Canadian colleagues, as you can imagine, talking to them over the last 18 months or so. And so we are reviewing it. It's likely that we are going to change that assessment process and move it to a wholly online, much more streamlined process. So yeah, currently, as I described, but already looking at it, and we'll look to move it on and modernize it and make it less burdensome.
Thanks.
If I just
Oh, yeah,
follow
do
up,
Mark.
I
Go
should
ahead.
have mentioned that we were only able to create the online course with some very generous funding from our Canadian government. So thank you to them, and you may want to have a word with your government.
Thanks very much, Mark. Gentleman at the back.
Thank you very much. I'm Andrew Geldad from BDP Quadrangle, and I'm another survivor of the BEFA program as well.
You're looking very well on it.
This more or less relates to students. Currently, we have a Part 1 student from the UK in our office, and I know a requirement of that is filling in log sheets. So we may have more students with this MRA now coming to Canada. I'm a licensed UK architect as well, so I'm assuming there's no issue with signing off on their experience while they're here if they do go back to the UK to complete their education. I'm just curious to see if there's anything to be concerned about there. Thank you.
Might be one for me. I think this is one to keep watching brief. You might not have noticed, but the ARB commissioned an external commission series of experts to look at the professional practical experience requirements for those training to be architects. And one of the things they looked at was the requirements in relation to work experience in both content, timelines, how it's governed and assured, but also some of those requirements in relation to the jurisdictions in which it's done. So I think we're keeping that under review, but I definitely recommend you look at the ARB website and look at the what's called the PPE Commission, because I think that will give a pretty strong signal of direction of travel. I think up until that point, I think it's just refer to the website in relation to the current registration requirements. And if you do that, that's probably the safest bet. But there may be some changes that are worthwhile either being cognizant of or indeed giving us feedback on what that may mean practically. Looking on line, it's just trying to work out questions. Michael Demola says, I recently took advantage of the NCARB registration in the US. So will NCARB be able to transmit your details they already hold to ARBC for the MRA, or has this solely to be through ARBC on behalf of ROAC? I know there's an option for Canadian licensure on the NCARB platform. So I think, Mark, you touched on this a bit earlier in the slides, but maybe if you could explain a little bit more about that triumvirate relationship or not.
Yes, at this point, this is one of those exceptions that whilst we both have agreements with NCARB, it's not a triangulated agreement. So it will have to be directly between the two countries.
Thanks. Any other questions in the room? Otherwise, I will just double check I've not missed anything critical online. No, I think we've covered most of those. I should say for anyone either online or in the room, if you've got any further questions, absolutely do. I direct them to the team either at ARB, and there's information online about that, info@arb.org.uk. And no doubt Mark and they can direct their questions directly to ARBC on behalf of the different provinces and members of ROAC. So without any further ado, just to thank everyone online for joining. I think we may be able to go through some of the questions. So if we can download those, we will try and attempt to do that. I know from ARB's point of view, we'll developing an ongoing Q&A, so that'd be really helpful to inform that. And again, to thank everyone in the room and online for joining us at this Q&A. Really appreciate it. For those of you in Toronto, then there are refreshments outside. For those of you online, do get a cup of tea if you're in the UK, in Canada, whatever is your poison of choice. So thank you very much indeed.